You requested Robin next, so here we go with Tim Drake. Robin is a stealth specialist who uses the bow staff to take down enemies with elemental effects, but mostly it's focused on stealth. Let's go through his best skills, momentum abilities, and how to play this sneaky boy. Let's go. Let me know in the comments your favorite Robin. All right, let's get into the must-have skills. Now, Robin is that stealth specialist that uses the bow staff, which gives you a little bit of AoE potential because he waves that stick around. You can often hit multiple enemies, but he also has a very strong focus on elemental damage when combat actually does break out and you're just fighting people like normally. And we'll start out with the must-have skills. The first is absolutely Turnabout Takedown. This allows Robin to perform takedowns and stealth strikes on the large enemies. Now, this is actually probably one of the best skills in the game, period, because those big giant large enemies that are often really hard to kill and just like massive health sponges, Robin can just one-shot them. When you get further into the game, you can't necessarily one-shot them. You might have to stealth strike them because they just have too much health. But when you are in those early stages and even mid-game and towards the late game, as you get more powerful, you can still just stealth strike them and just one-shot them. It just makes so much difference. You should combo this with the Stealth Takedown Plus in the Knighthood tree, which will increase your damage, critical chance, defense, and elemental effect build up for 15 seconds after performing a takedown. And as Robin, you always want to start fights with a takedown, so it just helps trigger that motion and get you really into the thick of things. There is another couple of skills that you really should be getting, and it's to buff your elemental decoy as well as your elemental damage, but we'll talk about those in a little bit. But the first is really the elemental decoy and the exploding decoy. Both of these will make your decoy just so much more powerful, and you can just use it to distract enemies in combat and explode them with elemental damage and just deal heaps of damage without really having to do too much effort. You just use this ability to evade, and then it'll just explode, deal AoE damage to enemies around you. So that's your initial focuses, things you absolutely have to get. And then we move on to your elemental stealth machine kind of general play style. So once you've got those skills in the slugger line, there isn't too much else to pick up other than maybe some crit damage and just your overall improvements, but the decoy is the main thing you want to get. In the shadow skill line, I was I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Now, I moved into the Vantage hanging takedown, but I honestly have never used it. I barely ever see the trigger to even use this prompt, and I just don't know if it's really worth it. So once you get Turnabout Takedown, you can probably ignore the shadow line. Maybe you could go and get some of the the passives to make you harder to spot, that kind of thing, but I really don't think it's needed because it's pretty easy to avoid being spotted in Gotham Knights. The Tinkering Tree is where you want to spend your next few points. Now, Elemental Charge to increase your elemental buildup. Sticky Pellet you absolutely want to pick up. Doesn't sound that good, but you could just pop this bad boy on the ground and it'll just deal AoE elemental damage to literally everything that it hits. Now, I decided to go with the enhanced sticky pellets rather than getting sticky pellets ×3 to increase the damage and the time that it lasts. You could get the 3 sticky pellets at once, just allow you to have multiple on the ground. They kind of act like mines, but I feel that's not necessary. I mostly use it in the flow of combat rather than as a stealth kind of ability. Now, moving on to Elemental Burst, you absolutely should pick this up. So when Robin deals elemental damage, he gains 5% chance of dealing additional elemental damage in an area. Elemental Burst also reduces enemies' elemental resistance. So essentially it just increases your elemental damage, and because we are using a lot of elemental damage with Robin, and all of your weapons should have an elemental damage effect on them, by the way. Well, as soon as you get them, any weapon, even if a weapon has more damage but doesn't have the elemental effect, I wouldn't switch to it. I would just keep the one that has that elemental damage. You could also try and use 2 different elemental types with your ranged and melee, because some enemies will have resistances. You'll notice this by the gray damage indicator that comes up on them. If it's just gray, it means they're resistant to that damage type, so you want to try and use a different damage type on them. But it doesn't matter too much, but it's just worth having those 2 different on you so that if you do come across those enemies, you can be a bit more flexible in those combat encounters. And it also helps when you're using your momentum abilities, because one of the momentum abilities we're going to talk about is melee and one is range, so it's perfect to have 2 different elemental types so you can mix up your elemental damage. So speaking of those momentum abilities, Fireworks is actually lit. Now, this is a ranged attack that will deal AoE damage pretty much all around you in whatever elemental type you're using, and it will basically trigger that status effect on everything it hits. Because you do have so much passive elemental build-up buffs as Robin, you can trigger that effect on everything you hit. So whether it's fire or ice or lightning or whatever it happens to be, you can trigger that effect very easily. I also really like the elemental decoy. Decoy is pretty average until you actually get those skills we talked about in the must-have skills. Once you've got that, it becomes really powerful and a great way to avoid damage, move enemies away from you so they're not focusing you, and then allowing you to use use those effects. I do also like Robin's ultimate ability, the microbots that he does summon, though I wouldn't actually spend the ability points in the knighthood line just to upgrade these. I probably wouldn't bother. It's not really necessary, and for the most part you can spend it on these elemental effects and getting down deeper into those elemental trees, because you will need those ability points so you can actually get all of these elemental bonuses for Robin, and we don't want to waste them on things that aren't necessarily beneficial to him in the short term, I suppose. Make sure you go check out my Batgirl video as well. I'm working on the other 2 knights right now, so I'll have those videos coming out for you soon. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.